While I was at Cisco Live earlier this month, one of the hacks somebody figured out how to do was to basically social engineer or do a direct prompt injection with Meta's support bot and basically get it to reset the password and give the two-factor authentication code for one of Meta's own like public Instagram accounts. That's an example of a chat bot that has too many permissions and shouldn't be able to do that.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Simply Offensive. Today I'm excited to be joined by Kat McNamara. Kat and I know each other from X, formerly Twitter, been connected for a while and decided that she looked like she had a cool background story. And what else is super cool too is not only does Kat have one CCIE, I believe she has at least two CCIEs, which CCIE is a pretty major certification. It was like one of the first certifications was actually practical, meaning it was a hands-on. There was a lab portion of it where you had to solve some kind of technical challenges or configurations, which a lot of people may be familiar with OSCP, but OSCP wasn't the first one to do that. You had the CCIE that did that, and I believe the Red Hat certification came after that, offered that, but the CCIE was one of the first that offered that. So if I recollect correctly, they have to do a written exam. Once they pass the written exam, they have to set up the in-person lab portion of it. And I remember back in my sysadmin days, something I never attempted. The most I ever got was CCNA, but I was very familiar with the CCIE because some of my network engineering colleagues were focusing on that. And I remember how at the time, I think back in the late 90s, early 2000s, at the time, the only place to get that was to go to California to one of the offices there, one of the labs. I think now they may have more than one, but having to do that hands-on lab to prove that you knew what you're doing instead of like a lot of certifications where you can just memorize questions and answers. So very super impressive and excited to have you on the show. Welcome to the show, Katherine.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much, Philip. Yeah, and CCIE is a monster of a lab. It's like 8 hours, but it's as much of a speed test as it is a knowledge practical as well. You can very much have the knowledge, but also fail just because you didn't get everything configured in time. And yes, you're right. I do have two. I don't know how prestigious they are now compared to like when I first got them. I think I think the industry has kind of moved on to more open like not vendor neutral certs in my experience, but it was a long road getting those. It was like 2 years of solid hands-on study for each one and a couple failures.
So, or what was one of those like some specialization or something since you got the two CCIEs?
One was in data center and one was in security. They have specializations like, well, it used to be route and switch, then it went to like enterprise. There's security, collab, service provider, data center, things like that. And people usually spend a couple of years studying for it for the practical side. The written one, multiple choice, in my opinion, pretty easy in comparison. The lab one, it's as much of a speed test, knowledge test, and a literal exam where you just have to like follow those instructions literally. If you do anything, deviate outside of them, add extra configs, that can also lose and fail you as well.
Very interesting. Yeah, bet that seems like a stressful experience.
Yeah, we have a joke where because it costs us $1,600 to take each lab exam each time you take it. So if you fail, we just call it a $1,600 lunch. Because the only thing you get free out of it at that point, well, not free, but you get is the lunch that break in between. So if you fail, you pretty much just earned yourself a $1,600 lunch.
Hopefully it's a good lunch.
Actually, my experience, it was not that great. It was definitely not worth $1,600. It's not gourmet by any means.
Doesn't sound surprising. But before we get too far into it, if you wouldn't mind sharing your origin story, kind of how you got interested and how you got started.
Okay, this is going to be fun. So I did a David Bombal interview like back like in 7 or 8 years ago. So I guess I should kind of add on to that because, I think I just went through like a little portion of that. But so I grew up in Silicon Valley. My dad was a tech entrepreneur. So I was before it was cool or before it was common to have computers in your household. I actually had computers growing up that I played with, that I got to like take apart, put together. I remember putting together my first like 286, for example, which is going way back there, back when we had like EGA graphics and we had to have a dedicated sound. Video and sound card. It wasn't all just built into the motherboard like it is these days. And I would say that my childhood, I had a lot of good things that, made me interested in technology, but, I had some, rough stuff happen as well, like, without going into too much detail, but, I was a teenager and I did teenage things with computers, as I think a lot of us probably did. Uh, and, hit my teenage years and, got into a little bit of a rebellious streak, mostly just, mouthing off to parents and stuff. And I ended up getting sent away to like a, hell boarding school that I think people have now commonly learned about in the media these days. If you guys want to know all about that, just go watch This Is Paris with Paris Hilton. I'm actually in that documentary with her. We got sent away to the same crazy place in Utah. So I was actually in that documentary talking about it, and we helped pass some federal legislation and local legislation to stop abuses in those schools. So that was like what happened in my teenage years. I turned 18, came out into the world, and I think, I had a rough kind of start to my adult life and 20s. And one of the things I went over in David Bomble's interview like years ago is that I, eventually around the age of like my mid 20s, I actually ended up in a situation where I was homeless and I didn't really have a career path, no schooling under my belt. I was really good with computers, but I didn't really know what to do with it. I grew up thinking that the only way to get into tech was to get a computer science degree, and I felt like I'm really crappy at math, so that'll never be an opportunity for me. And just like when everything kind of like hit rock bottom in my life in my mid-20s, I ended up, reading into it and studying it, and I found out that there's IT and other types of tech degrees that are not like super math heavy, and I learned about certifications and other things. So I ended up getting 2 jobs. One was kind of like an entry-level tech job that I ended up getting. Like, I showed up for a customer service position and then wowed the owner enough to get like a kind of like a little junior admin job. And then the second job was like a full-time job at night doing like security work. So I had like 4 hours in between, one job going to the other. And that was my sleep time. And so I worked my butt off and just studied and studied and studied all night long when I was at my security job, and took any extra money I had, got like the basic CompTIA certifications and other things until I was, at a skill level and, looked good enough on paper to make the job leap to the next job that was actually like more like better tech stuff. I think it was like a basic security analyst job. And it was like a basic security analyst job at a hospital system. And from there, I was like doubled my salary almost immediately. I got tuition reimbursement benefits, and I decided to go for like a WGU degree, which had a bunch of certifications built in as well. And in that, I found that I really loved hands-on stuff like network engineering, security stuff. I did not want to be a policy or compliance person. And I just my career from there just kept making leaps and bounds because I would find something I was interested in and I was like, I want to get a job in this. So, I found like I was studying for the CCNA. I really liked networking because I was like, ooh, this is cool. I can actually like have hands-on. Got a network engineering job next. Things like that, like kind of is how my career kind of exploded from there. And now I work as a technical solutions architect for like Cisco systems, but it's been like a long many years. And I would say that I did not have the best start in life just based on like just a really crappy like teenage years, my early 20s. But I think that even though that sucked that it happened at the time, I decided I wasn't going to, just sit and wallow in it. And I was going to do something to effectively turn around my life and try to be better. And I think that drove me more than anything else.
Yeah, that's a great story. And one of the things I love about it is because, over the years, everyone has thought that you had to have a 4-year degree to be able to, do anything in technology or cybersecurity. People were preaching degrees, and you see how a lot of folks went to school and got degrees that weren't useful. And some fortunately found the way and got certifications or found out about security or technology. But it's just really kind of sad for the longest time. People really only taught that there's only way a 4-year degree, because you look at how a lot of these trade schools kind of had less attendance. This is less of a career path, because the high school I went to, we actually had If you wanted to be a AC repair person, they had AC courses. They had courses on how to build houses, and one of the projects was throughout the school year you built a house. They had auto body repair. They had like barber and beauty shop type certifications or trainings where you learned how to do the skills, and then you went for the test to get your license. So it's good at one time that they had all these opportunities for trade schools and just technology specific stuff, but how so many people forgot about that and thought you had to get the 4-year degree. But it's, good that you're sharing your story of how you did it, although you do have the degrees, but to show how you can use certifications to build a good career, and you don't necessarily have to do the 4-year degree thing, because sometimes some people just don't do school well.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, like, my choice to get my degree was more of a personal one. I didn't want to be the only kid in my family that basically didn't get a degree, and it was free, essentially, because I had tuition reimbursement. I don't know if I would ever encourage anyone to, like, rack up 6 figures in debt just to get a CS degree or something. But like I tell most folks, especially like people new in the field, do you need a degree to succeed in this field? No. Do you need a tech degree to even succeed in this field? No. If you do, like I've seen some of the best network architects or security architects with like history or musical degrees. I know folks that are on like the Talos security research team at Cisco with musical degrees, for example. Same with certifications. Do you have to have certifications to be successful in the field? No. I've seen some extremely successful people who just like let all their certifications expire and they just study for knowledge now. Now, will it help you get potentially through some HR filters, especially in this day and age where like we have like AI job filters just looking for specific like keywords before it ever gets to a human? Yeah, it can help that. I think that it can help you get past some of the filters in general, but most of the folks I know that are like senior these days usually are getting their foot in the door with actual networked connections, meeting people at conferences and stuff like that, versus trying to, play the Russian roulette of AI filter bingo that HR does these days.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, interesting that how the AI filters and stuff have made things a little more difficult, because I was speaking to someone at RSAC and they had got some AI plugin or some AI app to run their resume through it to be able to make sure that it would be accepted by the AI job application systems. And so it's kind of, we had, the different systems that you have to apply online, look for certain keywords, and it could be tough to get in places. But it's interesting now that they're using AI to check the resumes first to make sure you check all the boxes before you get the interview. So it just seems like things are especially tough nowadays.
Yeah, unfortunately. So, and sadly, probably a lot of companies miss out on good talent that way, because I think that as long as I've been in the tech field, the list of requirements that for most jobs are wish lists at best, because there's just usually not a lot of people who meet, like, if you've seen some of the most ridiculous, like requirements being like 3 pages long, and in reality nobody fits that to a T. It's just one of those things where it's like a wish list at best. I saw one that was on like a Yahoo job posting the other day that somebody actually like reposted. They wanted 10 years of Claude code experience. I think Claude's been available publicly for 4 years, maybe 5.
Yeah, that's crazy to see that stuff. One of the craziest first ones I've seen that I really started paying attention to some of these outlandish requests. I saw one back, it was the late 90s or early 2000s, and I saw where someone wanted someone to have a CCNP, and they wanted them to be like an Oracle DBA too. So usually if you're a really good network engineer, usually you're doing network stuff and not database or application related. But I know Oracle DBA was at least one of the other things along with having a CCNP. And if I remember correctly, the job didn't even pay all that great either.
Yeah, I love those like weird mix of like technologies you have to know, and then it's like, and the pay is $30,000 a year. You're like, is that lower than minimum wage? What?
Yeah, especially when they're super demanding and they want all this stuff. They want this unicorn that if the person had all this, it'd be worth a lot of money, and then they want to get it for cheap.
Yeah, I know the job market isn't super great right now, but it's not that bad. It's not where you would be getting paid less than working at McDonald's.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. But then you hear some of these jobs that pay that little. But then I heard a couple years ago that if you're like a manager or general manager of an In-N-Out burger, you can make like $165,000 a year.
Man, imagine quitting InfoSec I mean, we always joke about people quitting InfoSec to become farmers. Quitting InfoSec to become a manager at In-N-Out because it just pays better would
Yeah.
be quite the story.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because I've seen some stuff, saw something a few years ago of someone leaving cybersecurity because they had pivoted from IT or something and then went back to IT because they can make more in IT.
Probably less frustrating as well, to be honest. I mean, we've seen a
Probably.
lot of like weird trends in cybersecurity, and I mean, you went to RSAC this year, so I'm sure you
Yes.
you saw it. Like, you can't even walk with like 10 feet on the floor and without seeing agentic AI about 50 times. If that was a drinking game, you'd be dead within 2 feet of walking.
Yeah. By the way, love the baseball cap that you're wearing because it was kind of funny when I saw you at RSAC when we drove by. You were wearing the Open Flaw T-shirt, and I thought it was Open Claw, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah, I was trying to see how many people would figure out. Like I didn't like most of the time people are like, "Oh, I love OpenClaw," and they didn't like actually read the words, and I was just like, "Yeah, thanks." It was for folks who are just like kind of don't know about the big hype that OpenClaw is like an open source tool that basically interfaces with popular AI APIs to basically do a bunch of work for you. It's supposed to lower the bar of for users to be able to interact with the API and get their work done, but it is also from a security perspective not the best. It's, requires like basically raw API keys, your credentials, things like that, stores it unencrypted on the actual whatever you host it on. And when it first came out, like people were putting it on VPS servers and they were showing up on Shodan with these like open ports basically saying, "Hey, connect to me. Here's my OpenClaw instance." So there was a band called Uinu Underground. I'm wearing one of the shirts here that busted out within like 2 days a diss video on the security holes and of people just like throwing this on production equipment or in the enterprise, and without even taking into like account the security issues that it was opening up. One of the more famous funny stories I heard about related to OpenClaw is the head of AI safety over at Meta basically installed it on a work computer or something and gave it full access to her inbox at Meta and basically deleted the whole thing while trying to help her with her email.
Well, it's kind of scary. It's nice when it works right, what all it can do for you, but if you misconfigure or do something wrong, it's kind of painful what it can do.
Yeah, that's just like it malfunctioning, but like the actual security holes as well. I mean, you have to install it basically as root and give it full admin permissions of whatever computer it's on. I know that some companies like NVIDIA basically created a sandbox for it, like OS for it, but I think one of the gentlemen on Twitter who breaks AI for a living for fun basically found his way out of the sandbox within 5 minutes of testing it because it gave it way too many admin permissions to basically be able to, you know, of itself to be able to break out of that sandbox pretty easily. But yeah, so after it came out, a bunch of merch flooded the scene with OpenFlaw, basically, making fun of the name OpenClaw. And so I was wearing that around RSAC and not that many people clued into like it was making fun of OpenClaw a little bit.
It's funny. So on the topic of AI, what do you think about AI? And is that something that you actually use in your day to day?
I consider myself a AI realist. I don't hate AI. I don't like fully love it either. Like to the point of like, you know, putting on blinders. I think that AI for security is great. I think that it has a lot of practical uses, like the machine learning aspect of like being able to correlate data in a log to being able to find the needle in the haystack, because you can staff a sock with, to the brink with bodies, but they're never going to be able to correlate in real time logs between 40 or 50 different security products you may have to find the needle in the haystack. So I think that there's a lot of things that AI can do from a practical security point. I think security for AI is broken right now in this industry. And I do worry about that. We have a lot of people that are just shoving it into places like a chatbot on a website that has plugins and interfaces with the backend system, a SQL server, or they're like plugins to like the actual operating system. And a lot of times the permissions aren't set correctly, or they may be given too many permissions, and people are able to basically do bad things with it, like give themselves a discount with some basic prompt injections, or be able to get information about other users. I think or be able to just do something it's not supposed to do. I think one of the more recent stories is Meta has, sorry if I'm picking a Meta, but this is just the one I'm thinking of. While I was at Cisco Live earlier this month, one of the hacks somebody figured out how to do was to basically social engineer or do a direct prompt injection with Meta's support bot and basically get it to reset the password and give the two-factor authentication code for one of Meta's own like public Instagram accounts. That's an example of a chat bot that has too many permissions and shouldn't be able to do that. And even Meta was like, that couldn't have happened. We didn't give them access to that. Oops, we actually did. My bad. Things like that, like security for AI is where we're still lacking completely. As far as do I use AI daily? Yes, absolutely I do. It's a nice, easy way to like do some research, but I always have to verify the sources because we all know in tech, AI hallucinations happen. I use it for my workflows, for helping me write a quick script because I don't want to spend 2 hours on the script. Things like that I use it quite regularly on. But I'm also realistic that, that there is a group of people in the tech industry that are pushing it so hard and fast that they're that they want to ship first and worry about security later. And then there's the other side of our industry, InfoSec people, who are like, wait, we need a strategy before we actually plug this into like actual production systems. We need to actually secure this for reals. And then I guess there's another part of our industry, vendors who all claim to have magic solutions to fix it. In reality, I think that there's no one black, oblique box that's basically going to fix security for AI. It's going to be building an architecture, building a plan, red teaming it, having some procedures and like safeguards in place to as you're building and integrating AI into things.
Yeah, it's kind of scary because if you think back years ago, shadow IT, you had to have some sort of skills to be able to put something together and get it to work. But now with technology, especially AI, it's a lot easier for people to put things into place. And then if they don't have that security or that good solid technology background, they just kind of put things together insecurely. So it seems like it's so much easier to be able to do shadow IT and even leveraging AI now compared to before, because now you have a lot of different automation tools that you can spin stuff up. Because I remember back when I worked at a mortgage company, we had some shadow IT, but this was like some of the different mortgage processing groups or different business groups within the mortgage company brought in people, but they did have technology and experience. It wasn't like you could just go in there and use this SaaS-based solution and spin something up without really knowing about technology.
Or if your users have or admin credentials locally on their machine, be able to install an AI agent right on it with a one line of code that they found on the internet, or one command like OpenClaw. It's just a copy paste and it's starting up, and suddenly you have something with like potentially with hooks into your production equipment. I was going to say, one of the reasons why I actually created a Cisco Live talk about AI risks specifically, because every time I would go out to customers, I ask them what their AI strategy is. And usually it's like, we have a written policy or we have DLP. So like the biggest thing that folks tend to know about is just the basic, like, I have to worry about people uploading something to AI that might be proprietary or confidential. That is like usually what most customers I'm talking to are like, think is the risk on AI. And so I did a Cisco Live talk this year where I was showing them like stuff like, okay, if you integrate a chatbot, here's what a SQL injection could potentially look like on your own website. Here's what direct prompt injection could look like. This is what indirect prompt injection can look like. Here's what command injection could look like, depending on what you have the actual chatbot or AI doing and what permissions you give it in the background. These are things that you should be worrying about, not just somebody could upload something like our salaries to ChatGPT and it could be learn off of it. We need to actually be focusing on the other threats as well, like what you're integrating these with in the back end and with your production environment, or the things that your users could potentially download and run as local admin on their machine that could have hooks into other parts of your network or other systems that could be potentially exfiltrated. I think one of the ones that I was actually thinking of, it's kind of a roundabout way, but did you hear about the Vercel hack a few months ago?
No, it doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, so this is a perfect example of like somebody having or users in the organization having too many permissions. But essentially, somebody had liberal permissions on like on their Google account. Like it was either Google Office 365, but basically they were testing, one of the techs or devs were testing out an AI app. And you know how when you download an app, it can ask you for permissions or to authorize permissions for your Google account or whatever else. So they were able to click authorize, and the threat actor had taken, who had actually gotten a foothold in the actual AI company that they were authorizing to like have access to Vercel's like Google or Office 365 space. I'm blanking right now which one. And basically was able to pivot from that company to this other company, and all because this user had too many permissions, didn't look at what they were authorizing when they were accepting the app, and it gave basically a foothold from one company to another to have admin permissions on their like actual like Office 365 or Google like workspace. So those are situations where, again, like why would a user be able to actually authorize another company or an app to be able to have full access internally without some sort of approval process or audit process to be able to prevent that? And those are like situations where like obviously that's not specific to AI, but like we had now have these new threats though, where somebody can authorize something in an AI, OpenClaw or something else to basically get OAuth authentication into your enterprise that way. And we have to like look at that more from a policy procedure and change control perspective, and not be able to just let anyone have local admin access on their local machine, be able to authorize the app's API to to have access to everything in your organization or make changes in your organization. And these are things I thought we would have learned like 15, 10 years ago. And but because of the AI and the tools that are like integrated in everything, we have to worry about it a lot more now. And it's sad that like as an industry, I think we're still a little bit behind, or a lot bit behind.
Yeah, that was the Vercel thing's kind of interesting because it just kind of reminds me of how easily, someone can even say like, for instance, build some different AI plugins or whatever skills that they could put out there and people don't think about it and they'll use them. Security professionals and those that work in offensive security will know that one of the kind of things to always remember when it comes to like exploit code is you make sure to examine it, look at the shell code, make sure that it's secure, that it's not got an IP address connected to some other, person's infrastructure. That's not some way where they can phone home or take control of that shell you create. So it's really, people need to do the same thing with AIs to really make sure they're looking at what you're using, because, this is kind of, a prime target for threat actors and nation states to build this stuff and put it out there, because so many people are using AI that don't understand security or really understand AI that well. It's prime target for them to be able to exploit companies.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately it's very appealing for companies to be like, oh, I don't have to use as many technical people, and I can just have this integrated, and AI will take the wheel and drive. And I'm still a very very hesitant about letting AI take the wheel and drive in any production equipment. I don't think we're there yet to have it fully automate everything and running everything. But I think that there is a drive from one side of our industry to do just that. And we're still, I feel like we're still far away from it being reliable and secure enough. And even if there's the potential for it to be secure enough, I feel like there's not enough skill set to deploy it in a secure fashion universally yet.
Yeah, one of your comments just gave me an idea for a sticker. AI, take the wheel.
Yeah, that's a good one. I was talking to another gentleman, Zach Corman. I don't know if you've spoken to him. He's a really solid guy at AI for with AI security. And he did mention like AI for security, great. Security for AI right now, terrible. And it's true. Like we don't have a lot of people who are good with securing AI quite yet. It's still a relatively new skill set, and I feel like the industry is going so fast and introducing tools at such a rapid pace that it's outpacing security at this point, which is not a good thing in my opinion. I'm personally curious on what it's going to take, like a tipping point where we're going to have to say, hey guys, we need to like actually take a step back before jamming everything in production and really assess this. Like, will it have to be like a nation state attacking our own government to do it? Or is it, what point I'm curious about where we reached that tipping point where we're like have to kind of pull back and start thinking about security more. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I'm curious to see where this is going, and I unfortunately worry that it's going to take something really bad for people to finally wake up and say, okay, we need AI is not bad, but we need to actually make sure it's secure first.
One of the things I'm kind of curious about too, because you've lived from during the whole from on-prem to cloud days, and I know based on my experience, it seemed like some people were slow to adopt learning cloud, how to secure it and configure it properly, kind of slow to adopt. What do you feel about with AI? Do you think we're in a better position now or worse than when people were just kind of making the jump from on-prem to cloud?
I think with cloud, it wasn't easy enough that people could pretend like they were confident in it. Like you said, I don't think, I mean, I knew a lot of people who are like, cloud's going to blow everything away on prem, and we need to learn cloud skills, but I didn't see as much of a mass adoption of those like there were a lot of people who did learn cloud, but it didn't like overall replace every networking engineer job, every server admin job. It just kind of was one of those things where they begrudgingly learned enough to be dangerous, but it wasn't like they were, pushing it just for the point of pushing it after a while. Because I think that people started realizing really quickly, like, oh, these cloud bills are really expensive. It's actually not cheaper necessarily than our data center, but they kind of accepted it. They knew enough to be dangerous, but they didn't, it still was slow, as you said. I think the danger with like AI is there's a lot of people who are just like, I don't know that much about development. I don't know that much about what Claude is doing, but it's really easy or what OpenAI is doing, whatever tool they're using. But it's really easy and seductive to be able to say, okay, this is what I want, go do it, and just trust that it's done. And it makes people feel very confident. Like it really is a low bar for people to do some basic stuff with it. And I think that it gives a false sense of security or confidence because the first 4 times you may ask it to make a script and go run the script on a server, it does it perfectly, so you don't feel like there's any danger. And maybe every 1 out of every 10 times it messes up or it leaves a backdoor or something that you didn't know about. And I see a lot of people just very confidently like doing stuff in production and then not going back to like double check it. It gives a very false sense of security. So I feel like the learning with AI isn't as strong as it was, like as far as like a slow ramp up. It's more of just people feeling that it's really easy to do things with AI, so they get a false sense of confidence with it.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective, but I do like or do agree with the fact that you said some of these things are easier with AI than they were with cloud. It's just kind of interesting how that whole thing's kind of shifted. It seems like more technologies are getting easier to be able to manage, maybe not properly, but easier to spin things up. So it's kind of interesting and scary to see how things are going. One of the things that kind of worries me the most is you look with the vibe coding, and if someone wanted to create a minimal viable product that they wanted to start a company, that they could build this stuff, and maybe they don't have the security background, maybe they're not going through and checking the security of the product as they build it, or even knowing how to implement it securely. And then they start a company and they're selling this product because, vibe coding makes it so much easier to be able to build things. And I've seen people with no technical background building stuff. I mean, it's kind of interesting. One of the restaurants that I frequent here a lot, one of the waiters there was learning how to use AI. He had went to some of these seminars and stuff, didn't have the technical background. But you take someone without the technical background and no security background are able to learn these things and use them. It's just kind of scary, especially kind of back to that original thought, just companies creating software, especially if it's like security related and they're releasing something with all these bugs in it. It's kind of scary.
I think I saw a post by VX Underground a couple months ago. Basically, he was amplifying a security researcher who identified about 100 different apps in the Apple App Store and that were vibe coded. And out of them, I think like 98%, he found it was leaking credentials or user data or whatever else. And so they made a website about it, and it was up for a hot minute, but they were calling it the slop apocalypse because like you said, like a lot of people feel very confident. It creates a workable product, a workable app, and then they just publish it. And it's very, as long as like Apple accepts it, it's not like Apple's doing your red teaming for you. It just accepts it. So they were able to get like AI chats of people, like people's AI chats, user data, other things, depending on what the app was. And it was a pretty high percentage. It was like 98 out of 100 apps that were tested. I could probably, I'll send you the article after, or the VX Underground's post afterwards, but it was interesting, but it also showed that like these top 100 apps, like that were vibe coded, 98 of them were like had really stupid leaks, like just things that are like if you had any sort of developer with some security understanding, they would know better. And that's the danger of people. Like it empowers the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it and it can and unfortunately, like these, I'm sure the people who made these vibe coded apps have nothing but good intentions, but they don't know what to secure. They have no way to spot check it because they're pretty much running blind and trusting the AI. And that's the part where I think is a little bit dangerous. Like we have a lot of people who are vibe coding apps, things that could be, potentially leaked, and it's not like the user is pen testing it for them. They're just downloading an app and potentially giving it, admin permissions through OAuth to their internal work Google space because they're, just accepting and they're used to clicking authorize just to get access to an app.
Yeah, very, very interesting and scary times. So we're getting down towards the end of the episode. Is there anything you'd like to say before we close it out?
Thank you for having me on here. I very much enjoy talking about this stuff. And if anyone wants to follow me on Twitter, I'm sure Phillip will actually drop my link in there. Definitely also recommend listening to Ooh Underground for snarky but educational music. It's not my band, but I enjoy them, as you can see, because Phillip and I talked about them before we came on here. But it's great in terms of education on like things that are happening in the industry and APTs and their methods. That's why I personally like.
Cool. So thanks for joining. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, take care.